can get started.
Great. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our webinar today on handling manual exceptions and the human in the loop experience within a document processing solution. We believe that this is an often overlooked element of designing an IDP solution, but it is extremely critical to ensure the accuracy and reliability of the extractions that you receive from documents. So we're excited to dive in. My name is Christian DeVito. I'm an AI ML solution engineer here at UiPath on our growth team focusing on solutions like document understanding and IXP. We also have Eric Bowman with us today. Eric.
Hey guys, Eric Bowman, also on the AI ML sales engineering team for growth products, mostly document understanding, emails, and anything related to AI in this new world. Based in New York City, happy to be here with you today and excited about what we're about to show you.
And thank you so much to our host, Diana, for having us here today. So we've got an exciting lineup. First, we're going to discuss the importance of manual exception handling. So just why is this important and something that you should be considering when you're thinking of intelligent document processing and architecting this within your business and your use case. Then we're going to talk about rethinking success measurements. This is really the questions that you should be asking. Then we're going to talk about ways to minimize manual exceptions because ultimately the higher accuracy and automation that we see that is going to lead to increased time savings and value. And then we're going to show two demos of ways that we handle the human in the loop experience here at UiPath with both our validation apps and Compact View, which are relatively new views within Validation Station that we are going to be showing you today for ways that you can integrate this human in the loop experience. So with that, why do we need manual exception handling? We'll go ahead and jump into the first topic point.
All right, thank you, Christian. So we're going to talk about the need for exception handling, and we're going to do that in the context of what UiPath does and what we help our customers do. So for that, I'm going to just spend a minute or two talking about the entire universe of automations and solutions that we bring to customers and sort of position human in the loop and Action Center, which is our product inside of this environment. If you know UiPath, you know we've been around for a while. We started out many years ago doing little bits of automation around our ability to read screens and understand what human inputs were being done in computer screens all over. So we could use what's called computer vision and automate the user interface of various applications. Very quickly, we progressed into API integrations and low-code applications and workflows to sort of enable more complexity around this. But it really took off when we got the orchestration and the governance in place to run this at scale and to run this with full control and full governance at scale. As things progressed, of course, we added more capabilities. We added ways to find out what could be automated at different companies and also to test the automations that have been built. And then further on, we also added the ability to get more data in. Because it turns out these little automations were often hamstrung or limited by how much data you could feed them, how much correct data you could feed them, and the cost of producing such data. And that's when we introduced the intelligent document processing, which is really the first case of needing a human element. Because if you ask a human to read something, they will do so and they will input the data. If you ask a machine to do it, there's a chance that the machine gets it wrong. And this is where the human in the loop element comes in, where you can combine the efforts of the machine with those of a human in a smart way. And we'll talk about that smart way. Obviously, we didn't stop there. We also started using more and more generative AI, not just the specialized and the label-based AI, which also leads to new needs in this space of human interaction. When I get a better read, when I get a more complex recommendation, how do I interact with that as a human? So we're going to see a few examples of that. Now, what we've done lately is we've launched our agentic automation, which also includes our agentic orchestration, or Maestro, as it's called. So now we live in a world where the robots can do a lot of things, and they can be helped by tools such as document processing. And the agents can be really, really smart about the execution path and figuring out what needs to be done. But you still need the people to lead. You still need the element of bringing humans into something like an action center where they can see the exceptions, or maybe for other reasons, business rules or regulatory reasons, be brought to the place where human decision-making is still critical. We're not going to talk about this entire stack of our solutions, just know that it builds on top of what we've been doing for a long time. The automations are in place, the API integrations, the trust, the security discussions we've been having for a long time. What we do is we just add layers to this with agentic automation and agentic orchestration. Now, focusing then on the document part, where we'll see the action center and the human in the loop today, we have something called IXP today, which is intelligent extraction and processing. This is our product portfolio in the document processing, the intelligent document processing space. And it's really where we have the components to go in and bring out the data and the intent and the meaning from various types of communications media. Anything from emails to structured documents to highly unstructured, long form, and very complex documentation as well. So IXP is there. And the goal and the purpose of all this automation around documents and communications, of course, is to reduce the manual effort. In fact, that's so important that we made a slide for it. The goal of intelligent document processing is to reduce the manual effort in the end-to-end process while producing accurate data. And we bolded the producing accurate data because that's really the critical part of this. If you ask a machine to do something, you have to verify what comes out of it. But you have to be smart about it because you need to reduce the amount of human effort. Otherwise, what's the point of running a machine? So again, manual effort is our measurement, and producing accurate data is sort of an imperative, right? We can't send bad data down the line. What do we do to make sure it doesn't get there? So here's how we talk about value then. We talk about value in terms of what's your current state, let's say, the manual state of affairs. In this fictional example, we have 1 million documents. What if it takes 6 minutes per document? That's 100,000 hours. If we can bring down the labor cost there and maybe go 1 minute per document, thanks to our combination of these AI models to extract and the human in the loop to look at things that need touching, we can do an 83% labor cost reduction. If we can further use business rules and things we'll talk about later today, you'll see how we could even push that further down. The big savings is reducing the amount we do on every document. And then if we can also push some documents completely without a human touch, that will, of course, be an additional savings on top of that. So looking at them then from sort of a maturity perspective, the status quo is very often that a human has to look at things, they have to decide what they are, and then they have to start finding data and processing data, both from the PDF or the paper, but also from internal systems. The first saving we can do here, of course, is sort things out. Make sure the right human sees the right things. This is called classification in the document understanding space, which is basically just saying, hey, if I get an invoice, better send it to the invoice department. If I get a warranty replacement request, well, that goes to the warranty department, right? So I don't have an expert sitting there using their expensive time to figure out if the email is for that or for this, right? That's the first thing we can do. It saves a little bit of time. And then what we could do beyond that is go further and say, well, what if we could just extract the data as well? I don't need a human to read the invoice. Why don't I let the machine do that? And then I can present it to a human for decision making, or if there's any errors on the invoice that I need to check because the machine wasn't really sure what it read. So that saves a lot of time, but we're still spending a little bit of effort, of course, to do all of these steps and maybe to do the decisioning after as well, right? We're down to half the effort spent here. But then when we bring in the agentic automation and orchestration, we can further compress this. We can take the human decision-making to the next level, and we can support it by what the agent thinks, supported by the data from the documents, and maybe some human in the loop fixes of data on the way if there was something that was hard to read. All right, so that, of course, then brings us to the most saving. The further we take ourselves on this automation journey, the better, because that will allow us then to go and do more with less human effort and still produce that accurate data. So in terms of doing more with less, how should we be thinking about these measurements? How do I think about and how do I position the automation when I'm looking internally to maybe resource the thing I'm trying to solve, or maybe to make a case for introducing this? So common first questions we get is, how accurate is this extraction model? This little AI engine we have there. How accurate is that? And how much will it push through without touching a human? Those are the first questions we had. We like to nuance this a bit because the right question to ask isn't how accurate is the little thing in the middle, but how accurate is the output? What can we do to the entire workflow to make sure we get accurate output? And that combines, of course, many different extraction engines, but with other things such as using confidence scores, using business logic and lookups. We'll take a look at that later. And also deciding to send things to humans so that the combination of human and machine can give accurate output. The little engine in the middle is important, but there are many little engines there, and what we want to do is combine them smartly so that you get a good output. In terms of straight-through processing, that's a very common term, and it's a measurement, but it's not really the one that drives your value. We'll take a look at this in a slide and just go through the math for everyone. But the important part here really is the average handling time. If I did it in 12 minutes and now I do it in 2 minutes, of course, I've saved a lot of time. And whether or not I touched every document or every other or every third is not the true driver of value. Let's take a look at that from a math perspective. Whenever we have a well-running document understanding process using one of our IXP portfolio products, there's a combination of extraction and business rules and lookups that will flag which fields need to go in front of a human. Maybe a math formula is off, maybe the confidence of the machine just isn't very high. In this first example here, we have 5 fields that are flagged for human interaction. It so happens that all 5 fields live on 2 documents. The other 2, the business rules were fine, the confidence was fine, the lookups checked out, so we didn't have to go with those 2 documents to a human. In this case, we can calculate this to be a 50% straight-through processing. 2 documents doesn't touch a human, and 2 do. And for those documents, there's a couple of fields in each. So this goes to an 87.5% field level automation. Almost 88% of the fields were done by the machine, and the human needed to look in 5 places, right? It's pretty good. So a lot of savings there for effort. If we look at the right side, we have a different set of 4 documents, a little bit of a different distribution of these weak points. So the machine now is asking for 4 fields to go in front of a human. But it so happens that each of these documents have one of the fields that need to go in front of a human. So in this case, what's the straight-through processing? Well, we touch every document, so there's 0% straight-through processing. Every document has one thing that a human needs to look at. But on the field level, we see, of course, that 90% of fields are automated. In the first case, we touched 5 different things. We had to look 5 different places. Now we have to look 4 different places. So the STP value looks worse, but the automation is higher. So 90% of the work has been eliminated. STP as a measurement here doesn't show us the value. Certainly, there's not 0 value in automating 90% of the fields. So STP isn't a great measure, but the field level automation, or field level STP, if you will, is a good measure of the human effort reduction we see. We can also predict the document level STP from the field level we're getting. And this is, again, it's a mathematical thing. If you need to have a certain level of automation, then you need to have a certain level of automation on a field level. And this is purely math, really. Like if you need a high level of automation on documents, you need every field to be extremely automated. But again, the average handling time you save with 90% automation is high. So what we say is look at the average handling time. You will touch some documents, and whether or not you touch a document is not the driver of the value. The driver of the value is really how many fields you can automate. So to summarize this from a theoretic standpoint, the model accuracy is the number of fields that were correct before you do smart things to them. Called raw accuracy sometimes, it's the initial prediction. It's important to have a good raw accuracy and a good model accuracy, but it's not the end-all be-all. The output accuracy, though, is after the business rules and human in the loop and action center. And remember, we don't always send fields because they're wrong to action center. It could be something that's just low confidence and needs to be confirmed. Or there could be a business rule that needs to be confirmed. And also remember, humans are not infallible, which means business rules make sense both before and after human interaction, just to make sure that nobody fell on the keyboard and put in the wrong things. All right, so how can we go about then and actually reduce the manual exceptions here? How do we get the highest level of field automation? Over to you, Christian.
So hopefully you guys are understanding the importance of human in the loop and how it fits into an overall solution. But we still want to be mindful of minimizing those manual exceptions because ultimately average handling time is something that we are tracking against and is an important KPI. So when we think about minimizing the manual exceptions, that ties into optimizing our overall solution. And what we mean by that is basically how can we design the most efficient and effective solution so that what we're sending to a human in the loop review is strategic and we're not needing to send, every field or every document. So let's talk about some of the ways that we can do that. One of the first is potentially starting with our out of the box or pre trained models. And what this allows you to leverage with our machine learning models is AI models that have been trained on a large sample set of a variety of document formats. So, by having a large sample size for your training set, that is allowing you to have a more efficient model. So, whether you're using one of our out of the box pre trained models or you're just adding a large amount of sample documents for your training, all of that is going to help that model be a more accurate representation of the type of documents that you're going to see in a production environment. We can also be mindful about the number and required fields that we are extracting. So, for example, the amount of fields that we are extracting on each document, as that number increases, the opportunity for potential errors and mistakes also increases. So, we really like to try to guide customers on only trying to extract the mandatory required fields to complete some type of downstream action or take some type of result that is important to your downstream system. So, not just extracting data for the sake of extracting data. So, after we have done proper model training, chosen strategically the type and number of fields that we're looking to extract our documents, then we can go through rounds of retraining our models with our documents. So, really specializing that model for your business, your use case, or if you're using one of our generative models, that might not look like retraining, but reprompting. So, going through iterations of making sure that your prompts clearly articulate and communicate what you're looking to extract. After we do that, we can add in a lot of these post processing and business rules. So, this is where we can add in logic matching, mathematical rules that we'll talk about here in a moment. But all of these can be done within your robotic processing automation, so your RPA workflow. And then finally, we can do additional retraining because all of this is an iterative process. We can retrain based on the feedback that you're receiving from the human in the loop review process, or just going in and doing very targeted retraining based on areas of low performance. One of the great things about the IDP solutions here at UiPath is we make sure that this isn't mysterious or a black box as far as needing to know where you need to do additional retraining or the areas that aren't performing. So anyone that's familiar with document understanding or IXP, you're probably familiar with our measure tab. And this is a place where you can go in and see recommendations for ways to improve the results of your extraction in your AI ML model. So this is going to tell you to add potentially more documents, what types of documents need to add, if your classification or your extraction is the problem, and also field level metrics for what specific fields to target so that your team doesn't need to go in and just spend many, many hours doing this retraining. It's a very strategic and timely approach. So all of this is going to help with a just reduced average handling time. So greater time to value, model improvements, and higher automation and accuracy, because ultimately both of these, not just one kind of isolated in a vacuum, are important things that we're considering. A couple call outs here. All of these improvements are going to be specific to your environment. So again, having that good variety of documents and training, especially with your documents, is very important. Having involvement from the experts on these documents, the subject matter experts, also really helps with having performant labeling and models. And then we always recommend, experienced deployment partner, whether that's services here within UiPath or leveraging one of our partners for making sure that you're setting this up right in the beginning because it's going to save you all of that time with the manual exceptions down the line. So setting this up correctly from the get-go is really worth that initial investment. We mentioned the concept of business rules. Let's take a look at what some of these could look like. So, some of them could be external verification. So, you're taking a value off one of your documents and comparing it to either another document, potentially an email if you're using communications mining, or just one of the many systems that we have integrations to or can do API calls against. You can also do basic math checks. That's always a good best practice just to make sure that, for example, in an invoice or a PO, if you have a summary of line items, maybe ensuring that the total amount equals the total of all of those summed together, plus any tax or additional fees that you have. So these are just ways to add in additional checks and balances before we even get to the human in the loop. Same thing with standardization of formats. So maybe adding some kind of like post-processing here to make sure that the formats are the correct format that you're looking for. Same thing with dates. And then once you're able to get all of these from business rule perspective, let's say any one of these fail, that is where you could flag and bring in that human in the loop to review. One of the things that we like to think of as the trade-off between automation and confidence scores, your confidence threshold. So within our solutions, you can set the confidence threshold of your comfort in which you'd like either specific fields or entire documents to be sent for human in the loop review. So what this could look like is if certain fields on the document have a confidence threshold below 85%, for example, either you present the document with just those fields for review or potentially the entire document for review by one of your subject matter experts. So it's really important to kind of find this balance within your organization of which one are you optimizing for most? Is it automation rate, kind of aiming towards that straight through processing, or what we highly recommend going more towards accuracy, maybe being more conservative with your confidence thresholds, which potentially will lower that automation and straight through processing. But by adding in the human in the loop in a very uh, efficient process with our action center, you can still see those time savings and overall value. This is just an example of kind of what those confidence scores could look like in practice. So potentially, the model is going to say, is the predicted value correct? And maybe it has a low confidence that the value that it's extracted is the correct value. So this is where you could send it for human in the loop to either review the field. Maybe I'm the subject matter expert. There was a low confidence for whatever reason. Maybe the document had a poor scan quality, or we just haven't trained a lot of that particular document. But I'm reviewing the field. It all looks correct. All I have to do then is just hit approve and send it through. However, if it's been sent to human in the loop and I notice any inaccuracies or inconsistencies there, I'm able to correct that field within the human in the loop process and have that update within the system. So either way, it's not taking me much time, but we're really helping make sure that no inaccuracies or things that have low confidence make it through when they shouldn't. On the opposite side here, if we maybe have a lower confidence score threshold, so the model is saying I have high confidence and it's correct. This is where we have that kind of straight through processing. This is where it goes straight through, it's submitted correctly into our automation system. But then this box here is something that we just like to bring up as an area for consideration is within your business, what is the impact of incorrect data? Meaning if the model has a high confidence or we just have a lower confidence threshold and it actually is an incorrect value, is that something that maybe just requires a little bit more work down the line? It's easy for someone in a later stage of the process to update, or is that going to cause, a critical challenge within your business and your organization? And all of those are just things to consider because it helps us evaluate what the right confidence threshold is and the right amount of human in the loop is for your particular business. So in summary, how do we achieve both of these important metrics that we're after, both accuracy and automation? And it comes into play with many different things, including the AI ML model for extraction, but also things like adjusting our confidence scores, adding in any post processing or business rules, and then also this critical component here of human in the loop, which is going to feed into any of our downstream data destinations or additional actions. And so this component here, the purpose of today's webinar, the human in the loop and manual exception handling, really ties into achieving both of those metrics. So now we're going to dig into what that looks like here at UiPath, a couple different approaches for how you can integrate human in the loop within your IDP solutions. Eric, over
All
to
right,
you.
great. Let's see if I can take back the share. Great. So your 3 slides from demo. If you came here for the good stuff, we're almost there. I wanted to give a 1 minute overview of Action Center. If you're new to UiPath or you haven't used any of our document and agentic solution, what is Action Center? Well, it's the place where we simplify collaboration. It's a centralized inbox for anything that a human needs to do or touch or decide on its way to full automation. So it can handle all kinds of exceptions and validation. It's got a strong user management, user notification framework built in, which means it's really easy for our subject matter experts or our data keyers to live in there and do their tasks there day to day. It also gives business administrator a consolidated view of whatever has been done, whatever needs to be done, and be able to plan the work going forward and make sure they have the correct coverage for everything needed. So what we're going to show today, which is a little bit new, is our compact view inside of Action Center. So we used to have a standardized classic interface. And one of the benefits of UiPath is how much is already templatized and built out and comes through just configuration versus doing development and coding. So one of the things we do is we have pre-trained document models for most of the common document types. And we'll see that today. We'll use a few of those to push documents through here. But also we pre-built a configurable user interface. So if you have one of our standard documents, or if you have a highly specialized document, you don't have to build out the basic UI for fields and tables and things of that sort. It comes with the platform. So we'll see the classic view, but what we've done is we've introduced a compact view, which has a couple of new pieces to it. First of all, it's got a better use of screen real estate. Not everybody has a big monitor. And it also has a business rules section. This is a request we've gotten over time, and we decided to build this into our Action Center, where you could do basic validations very, very easily inside of your Action Center to just make sure that your keyers, your subject matter experts are supported in whatever they need to do. Where do I need to go? Where do I need to look? What do I have to make sure is correct before I send it downstream? Because again, correct data is really the goal here of everything that we're trying to do. You can also use it to partially save table annotation, things that weren't necessarily easy before. If you had to do half a task and go and check something or go have lunch, you couldn't do that before. But in Compact View now, you could do that. You can partially save things, and you can also be brought to the first place that needs your attention. So that's a speed up. You don't need to go and hunt and peck and find your work. Your work finds you, if you will. So part of this is also then our new business rules section. And this sits in the document taxonomy section, if you're familiar with document understanding, where I can go in and say, hey, I want to enforce this data type. I want to have a certain display format. I want to use these decimal and thousand separators for those of us who have an international audience. You could also set the thresholds on a field level, both for OCR confidence and also for extraction confidence. And you start giving reasoning to a human user to say, hey, here's why this document is brought to your attention. Here's the list of things that I think you should look at. So what do you say? Let's look at this live. So I'm going to switch over to Action Center. And if you haven't seen Action Center before, this is my user homepage. It tells me I have a couple of pending tasks waiting for me. I've done a couple of tasks today already, so good job. And there's a couple of unassigned tasks, which means they're assigned to my team, but not necessarily to me as a person. So some of these may be assigned to me just because I deal with a certain customer or category or event. And the other unassigned ones, of course, are free to pick up for anyone. You'll see my average completion time today is 6 minutes. So I'm already getting the benefit here of UiPath's AI-based extraction. And you can also see some nice little pie charts here. If you're a manager, of course, you have far more information here. You can sift and sort through and look at your team. But I'm going to jump into one of the actions that are waiting for me. And this is our classic interface, if you're not familiar. So it has the invoice here that I'm supposed to process. And it also shows where things came from. If I click on a field here, it's going to mark up. This is a fairly standardized interface. Again, there's no coding necessary for these interfaces. They come automatically as soon as you define your content taxonomy and the data you need to get out of a document. You automatically get this classic view. Now, people do give us the feedback that, hey, it's a little busy. There's a lot of numbers here and there's a lot of fields showing. Normally, you would probably filter this on a confidence level, as Christian talked about, which means I'm now only bringing up either the empty fields or the fields that have a confidence that warrants my attention. But I also notice there's no business logic happening here in the classical interface. It's not showing me anything, whether it's good or bad on this document. It's not telling me anything about where I need to look or what I need to do, other than maybe just go through everything, right? So here's what we did. We introduced the classic view. We introduced business rules, a more prudent use of screen real estate, and also better communication with the user. So I'm going to switch over to my other task that is waiting here. Same invoice, same extraction, but it has a completely different setup for me. First of all, it's a little bit more compact. It's going to format things the way I've asked it for. But I notice, especially here, there's some warning signs. There's 3 errors and 2 warnings in this document. So this is really all I need to do as a human, is to make sure the errors aren't there anymore and look at the warnings that the system are giving me. So it's saying here the quantities is not equal to the line amount. That sounds like a problem for an invoice. And the unit price doesn't really gel. And if I go in and see here, line amount value is not equal to quantities and price. I can see where it came from because it's marking it up on the screen. And I can see this entire line. Of course, many invoices have several lines. They'll be brought to the correct line. And it looks in this case like we just lost a decimal point somewhere. Maybe the scanner was dirty. Maybe they need an update in an invoicing system. Surely this shouldn't be 106.56. They just put this decimal point in the wrong place. I'll go in and put that in for them. And then what we see happens is all the business rules all of a sudden pass. The math between unit price, quantity, and items goes to the amount and is now correct. Furthermore, if it was doing a comparison later on with the total and the tax amount, that probably got resolved too. So all my errors were taken care of because I was brought to the one point that needed my attention. I do still have 2 warnings though, so let's take a look at those as well. The first one saying net 30 days is not among the accepted values, net 30, net 45, net 60. This seems like the business rule should be a little bit more lax. Surely net 30 and net 30 days are the same thing. But what I can do really quickly here is just go and click and say, well, let's just take the net 30 then. I'll hit a keystroke, which is the quickest way to get data in. And now we see we satisfy that. I get a green dot, which is, means I get a coffee later, I guess. And then we have one more. We have empty value for vendor email. This is a warning. It's not a blocker. So I could just go and send this invoice in. Surely we can find a way to email them if we need to. But I'm actually going to take an extra eye to this document. And I'm going to say, I think they usually have an email on here. And lo and behold, there's something down here that I'm going to say is probably the email, orders at arrest. But it doesn't seem like to be a full email address. So it's still saying that's not a valid email. Well, it's what's on the paper, so I could send it in. But I'm also able to go in and then say, well, I see it's .com here because the website is .com. So I'm just going to add .com there. And of course, that is a valid email address. And now all the business rules pass, and I can submit this document in. So again, I have a much more compact view. I have a much quicker way to find my way to where the trouble might be. And of course, if I want to look at any other things, I could still click in and see where they are, right? I can see the dates are formatted really nicely. I can see, the numeric values are being taken care of. Missing fields are allowed. Again, it's up to the business rules. Maybe I should take the PO and go do the lookup that Christian mentioned. But for now, we're doing just the math business rules here, and we can see that that's already helping us quite a lot. When I'm happy here, I can save this document, and then I can submit it so it goes further downstream to my agents, my workflows, my robots, and just get the work done. All right, that was the compact view in Action Center, a much quicker way to do higher quality work as a human and still reduce the amount of effort to get that correct data out on the other side. Now, we're going to have one more level of applications available, and I think Christian's going to take us through the action apps, which is the next level, if you will, in customizing these user interfaces for even better payback for humans.
Great. Okay, thanks, Eric. So both the standard and compact view are a great way to view your documents within Validation Station for human in the loop review. An alternate to that or additional consideration would be creating a custom action app. So what this is a fully customized configurable app where you're able to change the view and customize it for your business to see not only your documents, but also any business rules or additional context for the subject matter experts reviewing those documents that you want to add. So let's take a look at what that looks like and some of the reasons that we added those in as an option here. So one is just the customization that you are able to create. It is a low code environment, so it's within the UiPath apps. So we do have a few templates available for common use cases that we see with customers that you can use to get started with your apps, or you can start from scratch and build this out. It also integrates with third-party services, and really, one of the key benefits is the ability to have additional business context all in one screen, all in one pane for your reviewers to see. So they're not just seeing the documents and the extracted data, but also any notes that you think are relevant for them, or maybe areas that you want to highlight for them to pay special attention to, as well as other integrations with other UiPath technologies. So if you are leveraging UiPath agents, not only can you have your documents there for review, but also any information that's coming from an agentic workflow, like recommendations on the type of action to take for that document, maybe what the next steps would be, and you can also take actions as far as not just approving or rejecting that document, but also basically adding in any action that you customize. So that could be similar to step that you take in your RPA automation. So sending to escalation, for example, would be an action. Sending a customized response could be an action. And ultimately, it also lets us process a higher complexity of validations for each field, but also for potentially pockets of documents. So, common use cases for using action apps or validation apps would be if you're not only looking to review one document at a time, but maybe you have an entire pocket of documents and you want to just switch between each of those very easily and keep that context all looped together. So this is an example of what that looks like. The UiPath technologies that are leveraged within validation apps is Document Understanding or IXP, Validation Station, UiPath Apps, and Action Center. So let me go ahead and share my screen for a demo of what that looks like. So before we jump into the app view, I just want to highlight the fact that a lot of the use cases that we see aren't as simple as just one document coming in for extraction. We typically see very complex end-to-end workflows. And this is an example of what one of those workflows could look like running within our agentic orchestration platform here at UiPath called Maestro. So in this use case, not only are we receiving documents from a incoming communication, we had to classify those documents to identify which type of document we're dealing with and also what type of fields we need to extract from each of those documents. So all of these green arrows that you can see here are steps that have already been completed in this use case. And then now we're sending our three different document types: an ID card, a brokerage statement, and a pay stub. So this could be an example of maybe a financial loan application, for example. We've pulled extraction results from there. So we have all of our predictions. And now we've added in this human in the loop review. So not only do we want to review the results from each of these documents, we want to see it all in one screen. We also want additional business rules and a recommendation from an agent on the next steps to take. So one of the questions came in of like, where would I add this human in the loop review process within my workflow? And do I have the process basically stop and pause and wait for action? That is all customizable for you and what makes sense for your business. In this example, I have had my automation essentially pause or hang to not take any further action until I go in and review it and give the go ahead on what the next action would be. So action apps are also found within, validation apps are found within Action Center. So like Eric showed, here I have my pending tasks, any unassigned tasks. I'm going to dig into these tasks that I have waiting for me for completion. And here in this screen, you guys should be seeing the custom action app that has been created. So some of the similarities that you can see is we have our document here on the right. So very similar to the compact view that Eric showed, because validation apps by default leverage the compact view just to make sure that we have that efficient use of screen space and we're not overcrowding our screen. It's all very easy to review and scan through the information that we need for our individual doing this human in the loop review. So I can go here, just make sure everything looks good. Again, if this were a production use case, I probably wouldn't have all of these fields sent for review, maybe just the ones that the model's not entirely sure of. But if we just want to make sure we have eyes on every single field for extraction, that's what this would look like. But then not only am I getting this one document, you guys can see the customization here where now I can toggle to additional documents that are coming in that packet. So it's also being classified. We can see we're no longer looking at an ID card. Now we have a brokerage statement, and I can go in and start to look at some of the complex fields for extraction here. And finally, I can go in and also see my pay stub. So we're able to see multiple different document types. If I wanted to also review the incoming email or communication, I could have that as an additional tab. And then over here on the left, this is where we can add all of the additional customization within the Action app as well. So here I have a recommendation coming in from my agent about whether or not I should approve the loan for this individual just based on a summarization that it's pulling from all of the combined documents that we're seeing. I could also add in additional notes here, anything that I want my team to see and take into consideration. And then finally, this is where I can take the action that really drives impact within my business. I can approve this, which is going to kick off an additional component potentially within an agentic workflow. Maybe I approve the loan and it takes additional actions from there, updating the documents within our system, maybe sending a approval letter to this applicant. I can similarly deny, or I could escalate this for additional review. And that could look like any number of actions, maybe sending to a different member of my team or a different team entirely. So between the three options that we showed today, whether it's the standard validation station, the compact view, or the action apps, all of them are allowing you to efficiently and effectively add in that manual review process to your documents to ensure high levels of accuracy. But you just can choose which one works the most for your business and makes the most sense based on the complexity and even just things like the aesthetics for what your team prefer from a visualization perspective. So that wraps us up for the second demo. And back to you, Eric, to recap, and we'll answer any additional questions in the chat.
That is great. Let me share my screen here really quickly. All right. So we talked about the need for manual exception handling in a world where we do more and more automations and have more capabilities. We still need to make sure that the humans can look at what needs to be regulated or look at things that aren't confident or doesn't meet the business requirements. We talked about success measurements, and the most important one being what's the most we can reduce the manual effort while producing correct data, and how talking about the field level automation we can get is probably the biggest measure. If we can go from 12 minutes to 2 minutes or 6 minutes to 1 minute, that's where we're going to see the savings. We talked about how STP is a measure of whether we touch a document, but not necessarily of how much time we save on a document. So it's a fallout measure rather than it's a guiding measure. We then talked about how to minimize the manual exceptions by using business rules, using confidence in a smart way. And then we saw the demo of the Action Center, both the classic and the compact view, and how the business rules could help guide our eye and guide our effort to be minimized. And then how validation apps brings us new capabilities, both for data, for suggestions, and for actions. So with that, I think we'll open the floor to the audience and see if there's any questions. I'll also make a pitch for our Fusion conference that's happening next week in Las Vegas. If you haven't already signed up, I guess you're a little bit of a hurry, but I do believe some of these keynotes will be streamed as well. And there'll be a lot of exciting news coming out in terms of how we address this market and help you automate more in the various capacity. But back to Q&A. Any questions on Action Center, Human in the Loop, how to think about this and how to implement this? We're here for you.
Yeah, and if anybody wants to open up their mics, I'm not seeing any questions in the chat. Please do and ask any questions. So you did get one question, how the validation station makes as compact view. I like the view where it summarizes the errors and warning.
So the question is how to do it. Sorry, let me see the chat.
Yes.
Cool. So the way you do it is when you create an action task, you have a choice in a drop down to go either classic or compact. So it's as easy as that. When you create the task is when you decide, do you want the standard view or do you want this little bit more compact view, which also gives you then the benefits of the business rules. So it's a creation time. You could do it in Studio Desktop, which is our I guess, professional automation tool. You can also do it in Studio Web, which is our online cloud-based automation tool. So both of those in the create validation task has a drop down. I think it's in the options or maybe in the advanced options to say classic or compact.
Great. Anything else anybody would like to ask? Okay, you're getting a lot of compliments on your great presentation. I completely agree, and your demos. So I want to thank you for speaking today, Eric and Christian. Great presentation. And just remember, everybody, this recording will be available tomorrow.
Thank you. Also, a shout out to Alex Dombrowski, who helped put some of this content together and also was answering questions in the chat. Thanks, Alex.
Thank you. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you all.